Thank you so much for tuning in to the programme today. It's about 5:25. There's lots to talk about, and actually Keir Starmer has given an interview to the BBC. We're going to read out a little bit more of that in a second, but first we're going to talk to John Rentoul and Joanna Marchong, because it's time for the Political Spar.
Hard-hitting political debate. The Political Spar on Talk.
I think we've got them both. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, Peter.
Yes, great to talk to you. Keir Starmer has been giving an interview to the BBC about migration. He says that he doesn't think that Germany is going to go ahead with the Rwanda plan. That is something that's been talked about today. We'll talk about that in a minute or two. But first of all, I want to talk about the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, who's been accused of making a false promise on his pledge to save families £300 a year on heating with GB Energy. Joanna, perhaps I could start with you, because a lot of people feel that, certainly the Conservatives feel this way. I spoke to Angela Knight previously, as the former head of Energy UK, who feels that Ed Miliband is perhaps not being entirely truthful with this. I just wonder what your thought is, Joanna.
I think this was everyone's biggest worry with Labour coming in. It's an election promise that will clearly not be kept. They promised about £300 worth of savings. Now we're hearing we haven't heard that since the election campaign. And also we know that energy prices this winter will rise by about £200. So it's really a case of people are feeling the squeeze and thinking they've had the wool pulled over their eyes during this campaign, and now Labour are in. It's just another promise that they are soon to falter on, just like the tax rises that will come in the autumn budget.
John, what do you make of this? Because a lot of people will say actually there is a need for net zero, that there is a need for energy policy in this country to change. Ed Miliband is perhaps the man to do that. He is quite a radical person within the Labour cabinet. He's certainly not the most popular with perhaps the Treasury, and a lot of this will cost quite a lot of money. But yesterday, putting £8.3 billion into GB Energy. What's your take on this?
Well, I'm afraid, I know I'm supposed to disagree with Joanna here, but
not necessarily.
I'm afraid I'm going to let this segment of the programme down.
That's okay.
But because, I'm Peter. I'm a Blairite, and I don't. I warned in the election campaign that this £300 figure was pie in the sky. Labour had made it up as a sort of fictional example of how much they thought they could cut bills by in the long term. It was as fictional as the Tory attack on Labour for putting up taxes by £2,000. Although actually it'll probably turn out that there was more substance to that.
And the Conservatives will say there was substance to that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very, very fair point.
But obviously, net zero is an admirable ambition. We should certainly reduce our carbon emissions if we can, if it's affordable. But I'm not in favour of favour of GB Energy. I don't see the point of it. I don't see what the point of.
Do you know what GB Energy is? Do you know what GB Energy actually is? Because Angela Knight, who we spoke to earlier, who is the former head of Energy UK, said she doesn't really understand what it is.
No,
if Angela Knight
doesn't
exactly know, well, what is it?
No, I know exactly what it is, Peter. It is a slogan. It is something that Labour MPs love, because it was something that got them through the election campaign. They could just say, we're going to set up a nationalised company called GB Energy, as if that was going to solve all their problems. And it's terribly popular. You ask people about it in opinion polls, and they say, yes, we'd love a publicly owned energy company called GB Energy. People have got no idea what it's going to do, and it's not going to do anything significant. It's going to leverage in investment. It's going to, listening to Ed Miliband, it's going to do all sorts of wonderful things, but I don't think he even knows what they are.
No, it is. There do seem to be a lot of it's going to get us to net zero. It's going to solve the energy market. It's going to cure your lumbago. Joanna, do you feel you know what GB Energy actually is?
Well, I think I know exactly what it is. It's a quango that taxpayers will be paying for. It's a ridiculous body that probably won't achieve its goals. We saw that Labour said they wanted to put 28 billion into GB Energy. They slashed it. The understandable approach, they're being sensible, to 8.3 billion. but they haven't changed their goals or the time frame they want to meet their goals. So I'm guessing they think GB Energy will turn a profit by 2030. I think later down the line, when we get there, it will be another case of a failed promise that we will have soon to have forgotten that was even their goal in the first place.
I just want to get your reaction quickly before the break. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has done an interview with the BBC, and we've just got another little extract of it. I'm just going to read this out, actually. The interviewer said, "Would you sit down with the European Union and agree something on a general asylum policy burden sharing that might actually mean Britain accepting more refugees?" And Keir Starmer said, "I'm absolutely focused on stopping people arriving in the first place. I think there's a general sense with the small boats that the last government lost control of the borders and that it's the criminal gangs who are deciding who comes to the UK. That's not acceptable. So I want to stop people arriving in the first place." That, to me, didn't really answer the question. Joanna, what do you think?
I think he knows that immigration is a really tough subject right now, that it's very torn. I mean, we've seen that riots are breaking out. People are very emotionally charged about the whole thing. So he's being very careful in his wording. He says that, gangs are the ones responsible right now. But is that just a gateway for him to say, okay, well, we can pick who is coming, so immigration will go up? Anyway, it's very confusing, but I would say it's a fluff piece.
Paul has been in touch and says Starmer says he's liaising with Germany about stopping the boats that the smugglers use coming through Germany. What's in it for the EU when they have to harbour the migrants that currently come across the English Channel? Starmer's not telling us that. John, what do you think?
Well, I think, yes, Keir Starmer is carefully not answering that question because he recognises that possibly the only way that they can reduce the number of small boats coming across is if they have some kind of agreement with the EU and with France in particular, because unless we can send some of them back, it's very difficult to see what can be done. So he does need some kind of agreement with the EU. But the problem with that, of course, is that we will have to accept burden sharing, as the phrase has it, which means we have to accept some asylum seekers. Now, the question is, are we going to have to, under those terms, are we going to have to accept more than would come by small boats anyway? Yeah. And that's the difficult negotiation he's got to have.
Okay, thanks both. We'll come back to you in a second. Just after the break, we're going to talk about pensioners dying because of winter fuel payments being cut. That is the warning from a Labour MP, a woman called Rachel Maskell. Also about more on Germany and also the union chiefs demanding more bumper pay deals for the public sector after Keir Starmer's deal with train drivers and indeed junior doctors. Stay with us here on Talk. Some breaking news here now on Talk, and that is that the Royal Navy serviceman who died in the training exercise in the English Channel, you may remember on Wednesday that his helicopter ditched. He has been named as Lieutenant Rodri Leishan, and he was aboard a Merlin Mk4 which plunged into the water on Wednesday evening after it suffered a double engine failure, and he is an aviator for the Royal Navy. He's died after that helicopter ditched during a night flying exercise, and his name is Lieutenant Rodri Leishan. And that name has just been released. The helicopter had a crew of 3 and was conducting mission rehearsals with the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth when the tragic incident occurred. His family have paid tribute to a talented and passionate man who was immeasurably loved. They said Rod was so immeasurably loved by his parents, sibling, partner, friends and family, and he was devoted to them. Our lives will never be the same without him. He's been named, as I say, as Lieutenant Rodri Leishan. Right, let's go back to our political panel now. I just want to ask John first, actually, about the winter fuel payments cut, and actually Rachel Maskell, who is a Labour MP and someone who has criticised Keir Starmer. In fact, there could be about 10 Labour MPs who rebel. Obviously, Keir Starmer has an absolutely huge majority, but isn't it a bit weird, John, that people who would have hold many Conservatives over the coals, and indeed did 3 or 4 months ago when there was a perceived threat to the winter fuel allowance, now that 10 million pensioners are not going to get it, and that's something Labour is doing. Keir Starmer says, to govern is to choose. These are very, very tough decisions that have to be made, but only just a small rebellion within his own party, and many people will walk through the lobbies in support of this who previously would have condemned it.
Yes, well, including Keir Starmer, yes, and Angela Rayner and possibly Rachel Reeves. I can't remember if she's criticised the idea in opposition. But I mean, this is something that Keir Starmer did promise us in the election campaign, and on which he has delivered. He promised that there would be some really difficult decisions and some tough decisions that would have to be made in government. And this is certainly one of them. It's odd that that Rachel Reeves chose to do this first, so early on, rather than to clobber the rich. But I think this is a way of signalling to people that the situation is really serious, and she is really serious about fixing it.
Joanna?
I think it's a really tough call to make from Rachel Reeves. She's obviously being very hardline on her decisions, which is great. That's what we wanted to see. But it's a bit of a contradiction in spending, where she's saying we have to make these big cuts, which many people are in uproar over. And instead of using it to do something else that's more worthwhile for taxpayers, she is deciding to give in to every union boss demand or pay public sector workers more money, for example. I think it's a really hard pill to swallow for people that, I mean, the winter fuel payments in its current form has been around for over 2 decades. So the magnitude of its loss will be felt differently, respective of everyone's financial situations. But at the end of the day, a loss is a loss, and you will feel it in some respect, or you will have to change your behaviour in some respect. It would be easier for people to accept that loss, I think, if they were given improvements which they would want to see, rather than just knowing public sector workers and fat cats are getting even fatter.
Speaking of fat cats, I just want to ask your views on 2 more issues. Union chiefs are demanding more bumper pay deals for public sector workers after a view, anyway, that Keir Starmer capitulated to train drivers and junior doctors. He would say, of course, that these long-running strikes needed to be sorted out, that there needed to be some way forward because we need to get the trains running on time and our NHS running properly as well. Joanna, a quick word on this.
I think it's very easy. I think everyone saw this coming, where if you say yes to one demand, you will have to say yes to many, many more, all of them really, because now you've set the foundation. It's extremely tough for people that are striking. Of course, we want our services to be running, and the Tories had the same problem when they were in power. But I don't think giving in to all their demands is going to really put us in a better situation in the future. Yeah, I mean, you say yes to one of them, you'll have to say yes to all of them.
John? Will union chiefs see this as an opportunity, say, right, the government's in the mood to settle?
They may do, but I disagree with Joanna on this. I mean, I think leaving aside the train drivers, which are a special case, which is why Rishi Sunak used them as his prime example in Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, I think the Tories would have settled with the junior doctors. They would have agreed to the independent pay review body recommendations on the armed forces, the police and teachers, nurses. All of them had to be agreed, had to be paid, because the situation is getting desperate in the public sector. The public sector pay has fallen behind private sector pay. And the recruitment and retention is getting impossible. So, apart from the train drivers, who I think do not deserve the big pay rise they're getting, certainly without reform to working practices, I think public sector workers do have to have a pay rise.
Okay. And just briefly on prisons, should we send people to Estonian prisons, John?
Well, it seems rather a long way to go just to find a prison space. I mean, as a temporary expedient, I don't have a problem with it, but I think we should be putting fewer people in prison, not more.
Joanna?
It's a very tough situation again. I think a lot of people will be surprised that they're even looking at sending people abroad. The figures that have come out so far are saying that sending them to Estonian prisons will be half the price of keeping them here in our own prisons. I don't think that number accounts for safe flights, admin issues, how we decide who goes where, etc. I don't know whether this would be the best course of action, and it's Yeah, it's very hard to tell. I would want to see real numbers and a thought-through plan rather than just putting it out there.
Thank you both very much. That's Joanna Marchong from the Taxpayers Alliance and John Rentoul, who's Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. That was the Political Spar. Thank you. Although they agreed on quite a few things, it must be said.